When a waiter refused to serve Donald Trump, the entire restaurant went silent. Was it courage or sheer foolishness? But what happened next was beyond anyone's expectations. Trump didn't just walk away. His response was so brutal that it left everyone in the room speechless. What would Jake do now? A hush rippled through the restaurant as Jake Foster stood tall, gripping his notepad with steady hands. His voice didn't waver. "I'm sorry, but I refuse to serve you." The words hung in the air, defying gravity. The sound of silverware clinking against fine china halted. Every gaze locked onto him, disbelief flashing in their eyes. The city's elite, dressed in luxury, froze mid-conversation. Someone gasped. A woman dropped her glass, the stem shattering against the marble floor. All eyes pivoted to the man at the center of it all. Donald Trump, seated at his private booth, remained still. His expression is unreadable. The air in the room thickened, anticipation crackling like a live wire. No one dared to speak. The waitstaff, the guests, everyone waited. Jake's heart pounded against his ribs, but he refused to back down. Slowly, Trump leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming against the table. His gaze flicked over Jake, assessing him like a businessman sizing up a risky investment. Then, a smirk curled at the edge of his lips. "Big mistake," he murmured, voice carrying enough weight to send a shiver down Jake's spine. Without another word, Trump rose. His entourage followed, moving in perfect sync, their expensive suits shifting like armor. He didn't argue, he didn't lash out, he simply walked away. Yet the silence that followed was deafening. Jake exhaled, pulse still racing. Hours ago, he had been just another waiter navigating the chaotic ballet of fine dining, dodging trays and balancing delicate wine glasses. Now, he had detonated a social bomb. The place reeked of exclusivity. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light. The finest wines, hand-selected from hidden cellars, flowed without restraint. For the rich, this was their playground. For Jake, it was a battlefield. Then, the moment that changed everything. A sleek convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside. The air shifted before he even walked in. Cameras flashed, conversations died. Donald Trump had arrived. Some diners straightened their ties, nodding in approval. Others whispered, eyes darting toward the exit. Jake? He clenched his jaw. He saw Trump not as a man but as a symbol of unchecked power, of everything he had fought against. The decision had been instinctive, the words escaping before logic could intervene. One step forward, a single breath, then, "I refuse to serve you." Within minutes, phones were out, recording. By the time Trump's motorcade vanished into the night, the world had already begun choosing sides. Jake had no idea what he had just unleashed. Jake woke up to the sharp vibration of his phone, the screen flooded with notifications. His heart pounded as he scrolled through endless headlines. Jake Foster, the waiter who took a stand. Hero or career suicide. The man who refused Trump. Defiance or disrespect. America reacts to viral restaurant snub. Social media was a battlefield. Twitter, Facebook, news networks. Everywhere he looked, his name dominated the conversation. He had made a statement, but now the world was dissecting it, and not everyone was on his side. Online, the war raged. "Entitled brat, this is why people hate your generation," one comment sneered. "He stood up to a billionaire and paid the price. That's real courage," another countered. Trump supporters painted him as a reckless fool who had insulted a great businessman. Activists, on the other hand, hailed him as a symbol of resistance. But as his name trended, Jake realized something. He had lost control of his own narrative. The door to the back office slammed open. Mr. Reynolds, his face flushed with anger, stormed into the restaurant. "What the hell did you do, Jake?" Jake stood his ground. "I made a choice." "A choice? You made a damn spectacle. This isn't some protest rally. It's my business." "Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused?" Jake exhaled. "I didn't do it to hurt you, but I won't serve someone I don't respect." Then don't serve anyone. Mr. Reynolds' voice was steel. You're fired. The restaurant floor fell into eerie silence as Jake grabbed his apron and tossed it aside. His co-workers averted their eyes, no one daring to defend him. Security escorted him out, the weight of the moment sinking in. He had walked in that morning as a promising chef, and he walked out with nothing. Jake sent out application after application. Each response came back the same. Not at this time. Position filled. We're looking for someone with less media attention. One restaurant manager spoke bluntly. We don't want the controversy. We run a business, not a revolution. Bills stacked up. His savings drained. The reality hit him hard. He wasn't just jobless. He was blacklisted. At the dinner table, his mother sighed, rubbing her temples. I told you not to do this. His father leaned back in his chair. You stood up to a billionaire, and what did it get you? No job, no income. Principles don't pay the bills, Jake. I did what I thought was right. Jake's voice was firm, but the doubt creeping in told another story. The headlines didn't die down. If anything, they got worse. Panel discussions, political debates. Even late-night talk show hosts took turns picking him apart. Some branded him reckless. Others painted him as a modern-day rebel. But none of them knew the truth. Jake was no longer a person. He was a spectacle. And yet, the man at the center of it all, Trump, said nothing. No tweets, no official response, no retaliation. Jake had expected a counterattack, a lawsuit, a public rebuke. But the silence was deafening. And somehow, that was more terrifying than any words Trump could have spoken. Because silence meant planning, and Jake had no idea what was coming next. Jake eyed the elegant envelope sitting on his kitchen counter, the golden seal unbroken. His name was embossed on thick, cream-colored paper, an invitation to a prestigious gala attended by New York's elite. A second chance? Or a setup? He hesitated. His reputation lay in ruins, doors slammed shut in every direction. Yet this event meant opportunity. Powerful investors, influential names, the kind of people who could change his life. With steady hands, he adjusted his tie in the mirror, masking the turmoil beneath. Tonight, he'd play the game. The gala was a spectacle. Chandeliers bathed the hall in golden light, the clink of champagne glasses blending with hushed whispers. Every glance, every hushed conversation carried an undercurrent of speculation. Jake moved through the room like a phantom, an outsider in a world that once shunned him. Then, his eyes locked onto a figure across the hall. Donald Trump sat at the VIP table, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on Jake. The weight of the moment pressed down. Conversation stilled. Guests exchanged knowing glances. A slow dread settled in Jake's gut. Something was coming. Trump rose, microphone in hand, his voice smooth, deliberate. Let me tell you all a little story. Laughter rumbled through the room. Jake's breath hitched. A waiter once refused to serve me. Bold move, right? Trump smirked, drawing out every word. Well, I don't hold grudges, Trump continued. I just bought the restaurant he worked at, and I made sure he'll never work in this city again. Gasps, stifled whispers, a slow-building tension that crackled like static. Jake stood frozen, every eye on him. His future, his dreams, obliterated in one calculated move. The force of Trump's influence crushed down, the unspoken message clear: defy me and you will lose everything. Anger flared in Jake's veins, but he exhaled slowly, steadying himself. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about power, control. And in that moment, he understood. This battle wasn't over. Not even close. Jake's face flooded every screen. News anchors dissected his downfall. Social media feeds spun debates. Late-night talk shows mocked his situation. Is he an activist or an arrogant fool who played with fire? One host quipped, drawing laughter from the crowd. Online, the divide deepened. He stood up to a billionaire. That takes guts, one tweet read. Actions have consequences. He gambled his future and lost, another countered. What had started as a single act of defiance had morphed into something bigger. This was no longer just about Jake. It was about power, about control. Headlines painted two narratives. Trump's ruthless revenge. Did he go too far? Billionaire CEO defends his name. Was this the right call? His supporters called it a lesson in respecting power. Critics claimed it was a crushing blow over a bruised ego. Meanwhile, Jake sat in silence, watching as strangers debated his fate. His life had become a spectacle. The rejection came before he even spoke. Every high-end restaurant he applied to turned him away. "We're looking for someone less controversial," one manager said, barely meeting his eyes. "You're talented, Jake, but no one wants the drama," another admitted. His dream of opening his own place? It had never felt so far away. Bills stacked up, savings drained. The once bright fire of rebellion in his chest dimmed under the weight of reality. Avoiding the news became a survival tactic. Seeing his name twisted, mocked, reanalyzed. It was unbearable. And for the first time, a question gnawed at him. Had he made a mistake? Jake shut off the world. No statements, no interviews, just him, his thoughts, and the suffocating silence of his tiny apartment. The reflection staring back at him wasn't the fearless man who had defied a billionaire. It was someone lost. Then, a phone call. "You always had fire, kid. But defiance without direction? It burns out fast." An old mentor. Someone who had built an empire from nothing. Offered Jake the hardest truth. "You fought back, but you weren't ready. Next time, you will be." And for the first time, Jake saw the road ahead. Jake refused to be a cautionary tale. His downfall wouldn't define him. His comeback would. No more impulsive stance. No reckless moves. This time, he'd built something that couldn't be taken away. His vision took shape. No restaurant would hire him? Fine. He'd create his own. Defiance wasn't his mistake. His mistake was not being ready for the consequences. Now he would rise, not as a rebel, but as a force to be reckoned with. Jake stared at his phone, the unknown number flashing across the screen. "Mr. Foster, I'd like to meet with you. I have an offer you can't refuse." The voice belonged to a billionaire investor, once a close ally of Trump, now a silent critic. He promised full funding for a restaurant, no strings attached. Jake's instinct screamed caution. Was this a genuine opportunity or another move in a power game he didn't understand? Pride gnawed at him. He had fought to stand alone, and now he was considering accepting money from another powerful figure. "I didn't take a stand just to sell out," he muttered, pacing his apartment. Yet reality struck. Failure wasn't an option. He had already lost too much. This wasn't about defiance anymore. It was about survival. After a sleepless night, he called back. "I'm in." Jake poured everything into his vision. The defiance. The name carried weight. It was more than a restaurant, it was a statement. Menus crafted with precision. A space designed to reflect resilience and rebellion. The buzz began to spread. Before the doors even opened, reservations poured in. Defiance wasn't just a restaurant. It became a symbol. People who once distanced themselves from Jake now wanted a table. Celebrities, activists, and even critics showed up. The place thrived, not just because of its food, but because of what it represented, standing tall in the face of power. The grand opening buzzed with energy. Paparazzi lined the entrance, cameras flashing, capturing New York's elite pouring in. Then silence. Trump stepped inside. Conversations died, the room holding its breath. Was this a power move, a confrontation, or something else? Jake stood frozen as Trump approached. No words, no theatrics, just a smirk. Then he extended a hand. You built something. That's real power. The world watched in shock. No threats, no smug taunts, just an acknowledgement. Was this his way of saying Jake had earned his place? Had this all been a test? Jake shook Trump's hand, but this time he was the one in control. Defiance alone didn't win battles. Building something did. The war hadn't been about revenge. It had been about proving that no one, not even the most powerful, could erase him. And he had won. This was never just about Trump. Jake had learned that power was a game played by those who understood the rules. His story had transcended politics. It had become a lesson in consequences. Defiance alone didn't reshape the world. Strategy, resilience, and growth did. Ambition without a plan was a double-edged sword. His journey forced an uncomfortable question. Was he courageous or careless? Did I make a statement, or did I just burn a bridge? He had once asked himself. The real battle wasn't about loud rebellion. It was about knowing when to stand, when to fight, and when to build. The world didn't reward rebellion alone. It tested who could rise after the fall. Jake had lost everything. Reputation, career, stability. But losing wasn't failure. Refusing to learn from it would have been. And in losing, he found a sharper, stronger version of himself. He was no longer a defiant waiter. Now he was a self-made man. His restaurant, his brand, his name, all rebuilt from the wreckage of his past. The fight wasn't the victory, he realized. Survival was. Jake stood at the entrance of Defiance, arms crossed. The world moved on. The headlines faded, but he hadn't been erased. No bitterness, no grudges. Only the quiet triumph of a man who refused to break.